This is not a I can fix him situation, okay? He's far beyond fixing at this point. Hey, I am back again, and this time we're going to go over the books that I read in April and May. I have definitely slowed down my reading pace a bit, but I did manage to squeeze in 4 books in April and 4 books in May. There were some highs and lows in the past couple weeks of reading, but I will say that I did manage to finish it out with probably what's going to be my new favorite romantasy. I'll talk more about it later though. So starting off with a high, the first book that I finished in April was Fable for the End of the World by Ava Reed. Ava is one of my all-time favorite authors. She reads it, I read it. I literally basically have an entire bookshelf dedicated to different versions of all of her books, and this is her latest release, and I was very fortunate to receive an advanced reader copy from HarperCollins Canada, so shout out to them for that. Fable for the End of the World is a YA dystopian sapphic romance. It's set in this dystopian world in the future where essentially climate change and capitalism and everything has kind of driven this world to the brink of almost collapse. And there's this one large corporation that kind of runs everything, and generally there are a lot of people that are in debt to this corporation because essentially what they say is, oh, you need that solved, you need that medication, we'll give it to you, you'll just owe us. But essentially it gets to this point where people owe so much that instead of having to pay it back, they can offer up themselves or their children to enter into the gauntlet. So the Lamb's Gauntlet features the lamb, so the hunted, and then the hunter. In this universe, the hunters are what they call angels, which essentially are children that were genetically modified and everything, plastic surgery, etc., to make them essentially weapons and killing machines. And essentially, as they grow up through these facilities, they're basically programmed to kill the lambs. So this story features around Inessa, whose mother has put her forward as a lamb for the gauntlet to pay off her debts, and Melino, who is basically the mercenary. So she is the angel that has been hired to kill her. And Melino, the angel, is essentially, this is kind of her last chance. Her last gauntlet didn't go very well, and she kind of had an emotional breakdown. They've been trying to kind of erase those memories, but that's not working. So this is her last chance to really prove herself. So while this obviously pulls inspiration from the Hunger Games and everything, I do think Ava did a really great job of setting up her own world here. Some of her descriptions of, how the animals have adapted to this world where there's a ton of flooding, where the deer start to have webbed feet and everything. It's very vivid, but I really like it, especially as a biologist from an evolutionary standpoint, just to listen to all of those different descriptions. The romance between our two main characters is definitely the main focus of the story. While there is still commentary about the world and society around them, I would say that really is the focus. This is a romance first, and Ava left this with a very open end, so I'm interested to see if she'll go back into this universe. I do really like how she had set it up. She generally doesn't do sequels except for Theory of Dreaming that's coming out, but I do think there's still a lot of paths that are open here. I think Ava does a really great job of balancing though, like the devastation and, the real world realizations of kind of what we're seeing mimicked in this book versus what's happening right now in real life, with also some hope. It's not all bleak. I will say the ending is bittersweet though. If you have read any of Ava's other books now, you'll know that her prose are just immaculate, and there's just so many good sections of this book and good lines and paragraphs, and again, I just adore Ava's writing, so I really enjoyed this one as well. So if you're someone who's still trying to fill some holes in your Hunger Games heart, I would definitely recommend this one. Moving on to the next 2 books that I read in the month of April. This is a duology, so I'm just going to talk about them both as like a package. The duology is A Debt So Ruthless and A Vow So Soulless by Vero Heath. This is a dark mafia romance that actually is set in Canada and is written by a Canadian author, so that was a big plus in my books. And I just kind of stumbled upon this one. I had just finished Fable, and I was in the mood for, a little palate cleanser, and mafia romances are my home. So I started going through Kobo Plus, which is what I tend to do. The search feature on Kobo Plus is not the best, but I was scrolling through. I can be exceptionally picky about what I want for my mafia romances. So I spent about a half hour searching, and then I did stumble upon A Debt So Ruthless. I don't even remember what exactly it was that made me settle on choosing that one, but I am glad that I did. I will start by saying this is very much a dark mafia romance. So if you're not into like the darker aspects of those, I would definitely steer away from this one. Our male main character is one of those, mafia male main characters that essentially has very little, if any, redeeming qualities, but he does somehow make you swoon sometimes. The basis of the story is essentially Deirdre, our female main character. Her father has given her to the heir of one of the big mafia families to pay back his debts. Deirdre is very much taken against her will, and our male main character, Elio, is very much obsessed with her, and there was a little bit of stalking that happened before he took her. And he has a lot of issues, and he's not going to work through any of them. Was this relationship extremely toxic and really messed up at times? Absolutely. And although there's a lot of stuff that happens between them, it somehow also is slow burn at the exact same time. I don't know. The first kiss happens like 3/4 into the first book. And although, like I said, there were other things happening, when that first kiss happened, it was like the buildup was so good. I don't know. I was giddy during that first kiss, and it doesn't make any sense considering everything else that had happened up to that point. But the one aspect that I really enjoyed about this is that Elio, the main mafia guy, is crazy, and he stays unhinged and crazy. And although he does kind of go soft for Deidre at times, he will still continue to do outrageous stuff and stuff that he knows will probably make her hate him, but he doesn't care because that's just who he is. And that's what I like. I want my mafia guys to be big, mean, and bad, and to stay that way. This is not a I can fix him situation, okay? He's far beyond fixing at this point. So this first book was the debut for Vero Heath, and then there was the follow-up to this one, which is the second in the duology. Again, I really enjoyed this one. And then there is a third book out that is the next duology, and I think the fourth one's coming out in June. I haven't read the third one yet, but it is on my list to get read for the fourth one that's coming out. Obviously, I've only read these two books by this author, but I think she's very quickly become, and could, depending on how these next ones go, be my favorite mafia romance author, because again, she seemed to capture it all in terms of writing a well kind of burned out romance while also having all of the steam and all of the absolute insanity and derangement that you expect sometimes from these, and it all just being very well written. So I'm looking forward to continuing on with this author's work. Next up, I read a short little romantasy called Hunted by the Fae Warden by Sue Mercury. Sue Mercury is a pen name for Sue Linden. She writes a lot of monster romances. The ones under her Sue Mercury pen name tend to be those that are a little bit more lighter, whereas her Sue Linden pen name tend to be a bit darker. I found Sue Mercury / Linden from her Cascade Giant series, which was like a Bigfoot one, and I really enjoyed those. And then I also really enjoy her other series, which was the World Ship Bride series. Her books are pretty easy to digest and pretty short, so she is one of my go-tos, especially when it comes to like monster and alien romances. So when I saw that she was publishing a Fae romance, I was definitely interested in what that was going to be like. I did get a digital arc of this one to read in advance. This is a short book. I don't even think it's 200 pages, so it's a very quick read and a good kind of palate cleanser book, you know. It takes place in the world where essentially the magic that gives Fae their magic has started to expand everywhere. So now the Fae are like overthrowing all of these different towns, and they're able to expand to more places essentially. So one of these human towns that they have expanded into, that's where our female main character lives, and she catches the attention of the Fae Warden, and somehow she ends up being his mate, which is weird because she's human, so how can she be his mate? This is a pretty quick read. It's definitely more romance than fantasy, and there's definitely still a lot of world building left to expand on here. But in the World Ship Bride series or other series, I think she did a really great job with each book kind of expanding on what was going on in that universe and giving you a better picture, so I'm optimistic that will continue. Next up, I finally finished the audiobook of Fire in His Veins by Ruby Dixon. This is the 6th book in the Fire Blood Dragon series that she has. I say finally because according to my Goodreads, I started this on February 9th and I ended it in April 24th. I mean, I tend to go through highs and lows with these books anyways, where I'll have like a few weeks where I basically just digest all of them and that's all I'm listening to and all I'm reading, and then I go through a lull where I'm like done. The Fireblood Dragon series have become my like nighttime story, you know. I would put it on before going to bed, but for some reason I just wasn't motivated to finish this one. Building on the past 5, our dragon shifters have entered this human post-apocalyptic world. We're following a different couple this time, and in the previous ones the male dragon, you know, was a dragon first and then met the human, etc. But in this case, our male dragon was actually hiding amongst the humans for a while before he was ever exposed. And him and the female main character already had a relationship based on that because she thought he was human, not a dragon. You know, and I don't know, something about this dynamic just didn't hit as well as the other ones. I don't know if I just didn't really like Lucas. I can't remember his dragon name right now. I don't know if I just didn't like him as much as the other ones or what. For me personally, this series definitely doesn't hit as well as Ice Planet Barbarians, but I still enjoyed some of the other ones. And I really just enjoy everything Ruby Dixon writes, so I'll always find some sort of enjoyment in her books, but I currently had the Fireblood Dragon series on a pause right now. I will go back because once again, I am trying to complete that Ruby backlog challenge, but we're on a break at the moment. At least I'm on a break for this series. I'm still tempted to go back and finish the Ice Planet Barbarian series that I haven't read, or reread the rest of them and then finish them. We'll see. The first book that I finished in May was another mafia romance, which was Be With Me by Gabrielle Sands. Gabrielle Sands has written a lot of mafia romances before, but this was the first one that I've ever read from her. I don't even remember how I found this book. I think I saw the cover, somebody had put it on their Goodreads or something, and I saw the cover and I was exceptionally intrigued. And then I read the blurbs and I was further intrigued. So for fun, I did sign up to see if I could get a digital arc of this one, which I did. This story features elements a la Romeo and Juliet. Her father is running for mayor, and his big platform item is the fact that he wants to get rid of all the crime families, specifically this one family. And of course, he, our male main character, is the son of this major crime family's Don. And despite their best efforts, at least from one party, they can't seem to stay away from one another. This book is definitely on the lighter side of mafia romances and actually might be one of the lightest mafia romances I've ever read. And that's not a bad thing. I had made a comment in my written review that, there was a great balance between the romance and the plot to the point where actually, the spice and stuff, there was less of that than I was anticipating, which again, not a bad thing, but it did kind of stand out to me. And I think that's maybe just because I'm used to reading a lot more of the darker side of mafia romances. Both of our main characters in this are exceptionally love-starved, but the root of that starvation stems from kind of different backgrounds, but they're both unaware of this fact about themselves. But along the way, they do find themselves in the same place of being open to receiving love the way that they really deserve to be treated. Our male main character is absolutely down bad. He absolutely fell first, and he is the one who is basically willing to do anything. He uses one of my favorite tricks in the book, which is, let's just do it once to get it out of our systems. You can guess how well that one worked. Given this one being a bit lighter, I do think it's a great one if you're looking to dip your toes into the mafia romance genre. And although this was my first Gabrielle Sands book, I'm definitely interested in reading more, and I'll probably go back through some of her backlog. However, throughout this book, we get hints and little tiny pieces, like the barest amount of the next book, which is going to be an arranged marriage trope book between our male main character's brother and our female main character's best friend. And I am such a sucker for an arranged marriage trope, and just the little crumbs and hints that we got in this book, I am 9 at the bars of my enclosure to get that sequel, so I will most definitely be reading that one when it is available. Moving on to the next book I read, which was The Summers Between Us by Noreen Nanja. This is another debut by a Canadian author that is set in Canada, so again, another big plus. I actually received an advanced listener copy of this one from Libro FM first, and then Penguin Random House Canada actually sent me a physical arc for it, but when I read it, I did read it via the audiobook, and this one is coming out as one of my most shocking obsessions of this year so far, for sure. I knew I was going to have a long night in the lab, so I wanted to throw it on audiobook. I knew this was a summer romance, so I figured whatever, I'll throw it on. It should be quick and easy, something to digest, but I was hooked. So I stayed up till 2:30 in the morning listening to this, forced myself to go to sleep, and then when I woke up the next morning, I continued listening until I finished it. The Summers Between Us follows the story of Leah Juma, who describes herself as the perfect quote-unquote immigrant daughter who feels like she's done everything right. She's landed a high-paying job as a corporate lawyer in Toronto, and she's recently started dating a man that she knows her family would automatically approve of. But due to some unexpected circumstances, she has to return to her family's summer cottage for a month. But going back to the summer cottage means she has to face Wes, who was her first teenage love and who she hasn't seen in 10 years since their disastrous departure when they were 18, although we don't know the exact details of what exactly happened. This story is told using one of my favorite writing devices, which is dual timelines. So we get both the present day story of Leah Juma, who's 28, and her and Wes basically kind of getting this second chance with each other. And then we get the past of Leah during the summers when she would go to her cottage and hang out with Wes, and essentially them falling in love as teenagers from the age of 14 to the age of 18. So basically you get a YA romance and a second chance adult romance all wrapped into one, and I ate it up. I don't know, it just had everything. I loved both aspects of it. Like I said, I was hooked from the very beginning. I just wanted to know what happened between them, but also wanted to keep reading about them falling in love and then falling in love again. Beyond the romance, though, there's a lot of discussion, regarding families, sibling rivalries, expectations, dealing with grief. It just really has it all, in my opinion, and I just really, really enjoyed this. This is Noreen Nanja's debut book, and I'll definitely be on the lookout for whatever she has coming next, because again, I loved this story, both the plot, the writing, everything, so she's on my to-watch list because I would most definitely read another book by her again. And if you're in the market for the perfect summer romance, I highly recommend picking this one up. Next on the list, I have this massive book, which is The Lies of Mortals by Mallory Weber. I think this one showed up on my Instagram as potential ARC request. I'd read the description and sounded interesting. I had put a request in, and I actually received this physical copy and this whole beautiful PR package from the author, which was absolutely stunning. I'm so grateful and appreciative for her sending this to me. This story centers around Arin, who is our female main character, who lost her parents to a robbery a few years back and basically has been supporting her and her brother in order to hopefully make some money so her brother can continue to support himself. She enters the King's Tournament, which is essentially, rounds of fighting, and whoever wins gets the opportunity to join the King's Guard, and basically they are guaranteed, a job and income for life for their family. In this world, the Fae also exist, but they have been separated from humans for 400 years now by this magical barrier called the Veil. Essentially, the humans are taught, not to trust the Fae. However, following the King's Tournament, Arin finds herself unexpectedly thrust into the Fae world, where she meets some new friends, a new shadowy, dark-haired, maybe suspicious, hot, attractive male fae, and she discovers more about herself, her heritage, and potentially a little bit of magic that she might have buried inside herself. So the author's note, they just say that this book is for mature readers who love high fantasy, intricate world building, multifaceted plots, delicious banter, slow burn romance, meddling gods and fates, he falls first, fated mates, prophecy, chosen one, darkness and light, good versus evil, hidden identities, enemies to lovers, one bed, found family, and books that are part of a series, hint hint. And while I do like a lot of those aspects, I do have to say that unfortunately this book didn't quite hit for me. First of all, it's friggin' long. This is 650 pages, and it did take me a while to get through them. This is an indie self-published author, so rightfully or wrongfully, I do tend to lend some grace to them. I do think the world building that they have set up here is really great. However, it was a lot of telling and not showing, which is not my favorite. And although they describe the romance as enemies to lovers, it's absolutely not that. I mean, they don't know each other at first. They don't know who each other are, but they're certainly not enemies. And they basically immediately kind of fall for each other. It does kind of feel like there were two books smushed into one. Like at the beginning, we're really following Aaron and this journey and through, the king's challenge and everything. And we're meeting some of these other side characters. And I was really enjoying that part. But then we get to the Fae world and it kind of all not that it fell apart, but the focus shifted from Aaron's journey to more about the romance, and towards the last half of it, it really just became very cyclical where they would travel to this different court for this event. They would attend this event and experience what that court did, and then they would have a night together, and then they wake up, and then a couple days later they go to another court, etc., etc. And while reading, the second half, I kept waiting for that moment that, I feel like happens in every fantasy book where even if you're not fully enjoying it, there's usually some sort of plot twist or plot moment that happens that makes you want to keep reading because you just have to know how that ends. But that unfortunately didn't exist, at least not to me in this book. So it definitely was a drag to get through at the end. Definitely pulls a lot from some of those classic Fae romantasy books. He calls her darling. He has shadows that he can use to do things. And the one thing that it really suffers from that kind of irks me is the fact that everybody loves her. She goes to the Fae world where she's a human and humans haven't been there for hundreds of years, and yet every Fae who meets her is obsessed with her and super nice to her. Like in the first part of the book where she's at the king's castle and she meets these guards and they're all super nice to her. And I'm like, this can't be right. Like something has to be going on. They must have ulterior motives, but no, I think she's just great. I think she's just freaking perfect. And I do wish we had spent more time in the first part of the book, like at the king's castle and everything before we moved to the Fae world, because I still have so many unanswered questions about the setup there. And I say unanswered because they don't get answered in the rest of the 400 whatever pages. So this is the first of a trilogy, I believe. I'm not totally against reading the second one, but I mean, there was really no need for this to be 650 pages. And my guess is that the second one will be even longer. And considering all the books I want to read, it's very hard for me to justify reading a book this long when I could read, 2 books in that same time, especially if it's a book that I'm not super insanely hyped or excited for. This is this author's debut, and I do think there are some aspects of this that work really well. I do think it could have also gone through some heavy editing and just a little bit of restructuring, I think, to keep it, moving, if you will. Moving on to the last book I read in the month of May, which was In the Veins of the Drowning by Kaylee Cassidy. It has been a long time since a romantasy has made me feel the way that this book made me feel. This very quickly became one of my favorite romantasy stories. Considering this is this author's debut, it is insane in my opinion. I was fortunate to receive a physical arc of this one from Hatchet Book Group Canada, and when they were sending out the list of potential books we could request, I was interested in this one. I am always a fan of a book with some ocean imagery. Then when I looked into it, I saw that Rachel Gillig, Ava Reed, and Allison Saft had all blurbed it, which to me is, just a ton of green flags, and they can't all be wrong. So I figured I was probably in good shape to read this one. This story follows Imogen, who is a siren that has been hiding her true identity though for over a decade now, as she is a ward in this kingdom under this king whose whole mission is basically to kill all the sirens. But then during her engagement party, a king from a foreign kingdom shows up, everything kind of goes awry, and all of a sudden she is exposed for being a siren and she needs to leave and she needs to run and she needs to seek protection. This visiting king is from a kingdom who actually supports sirens and they're able to live there freely, so she figured he is her best bet. In order to truly secure her safety though, in order to protect him as well, she forms a blood bond with him, which essentially just makes it so that they have this innate desire to protect one another, and it also makes him immune to the siren song. But obviously, if they have this innate drive to protect each other, it also kind of starts to blur the lines between what they're doing, for duty versus what they have to do because they actually might maybe like each other. I devoured this book. It has been a while since a book has made me spiral out the way that this book made me spiral. I was putting off finishing it because I wasn't ready for the entire crash out that I knew was going to happen when it was done, because I was loving every second of it. You get to dive in basically right into the middle of the action. It builds up very quickly. Imogen, our female main character, is now in like the top ranking of one of my favorite fantasy female main characters because she is perfectly imperfect, if you will. I support Imogen's rights, but I really support Imogen's wrongs. She has been repressing her siren and her siren magic for over a decade now. So when it finally comes to the surface and she's able to use it again, she has no control over it. She has a hard time reining it in, which is what you would expect. I'm not a fan of, when people find out their magic and then they can just all of a sudden control it. It takes no time. They are like the best that has ever been seen. Like, that's just not realistic to me. So I love these kind of stories where we kind of see the dark side of not being able to have honed your magic in from when you were young and just having it kind of thrust upon you. And then the love interest in this is just so down bad. Gives compliments as well as Mr. Darcy, just never knows what the right thing to say is. And he just has some of the best one-liners. Speaking of one-liners, the prose in this entire book are absolutely amazing, which again, given Ava Reed blurbed, I'm not surprised because she also has some of my favorite prose. There are so many lines and sections that I have highlighted and tabbed, and I could probably highlight and tab almost every single page because it's just so well done, so good. And the atmosphere in this is perfect, and I really can't recommend this one enough, like to the point that I made my friend go and request it on NetGalley so that she could read it and crash out with me, which she did, and I really appreciated that. In the Veins of the Drowning does come out on July 15th, so if you are interested in it, I would definitely keep your eye on it, put it on your radar, pre-order it, definitely put it on your TBR. I am genuinely dying to get my hands on book 2. I do think this could be my favorite read of the year so far, and again, one of my favorite all-time romantasies because it's just hit after hit after hit. Speaking about book 2, though, I will say that the publishers did me absolutely dirty with this physical arc. Like, what do you mean the teaser chapter is to come? I need it now. That just solidified my decision to pre-order a final hard copy of this book because I need to know what that teaser is. I need to know that first chapter of book 2. The sun has shifted. I'm now being blinded both literally and figuratively. But those were the 8 books that I read in April and May. If you have read any of these books, I would love to know what you thought of them. Will you be checking out In the Veins of the Drowning? Because you really should be. And feel free to tell me what your favorite reads of the past couple months was, because I'm always looking to add more to my TBR. There's never enough, right? Thank you for tuning in for another long video of me yapping about books. If you enjoy hearing my more in-depth thoughts about the books that I've been reading, or interested in potentially some other long-form content I might be cooking up, please subscribe, hit the like button, and I will hopefully see you in the next one.